My dears, they say you can never truly know another person's heart. You can share a bed, a home, a life, and still be sleeping next to a stranger. I learned that truth on an ordinary Sunday that shattered my world forever. When I opened that Bible and the note fluttered to the floor, I felt as if the whole world had stopped turning. The air left my lungs. The clock on the wall, I swear it stopped ticking. If she discovers the truth, kill her. 7 words. 7 words scribbled on a piece of paper hidden in the most sacred of books. 7 words that shattered the woman I was and forged the woman I had to become. Good morning, my dears. I'm Gertrude Miller. I'm 78 years old, and the story I'm about to share with you, it's one I've carried locked in my heart for almost 50 years. It's a story of betrayal, of fear, but most of all, it's a story of a strength I never knew I possessed. But before I begin, if you're watching this, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the Grandma Storybook Tales, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This helps me continue sharing my stories with you all. Now, let me take you back to 1969. I was only 29 years old. America was a country in turmoil. The Vietnam War, the fight for civil rights. But in our small, sleepy town in Virginia, life was quiet, deceptively quiet. I had been married for 10 years to Anthony. To everyone who knew him, he was a pillar of the community, the head accountant at the town's only bank. He wore impeccably tailored suits, his shoes were always shined, and his handshake was as firm as his reputation. He was considered the very picture of honesty and dedication. And our life? From the outside, it was a picture-perfect postcard. A charming house on a tree-lined street with a little garden out front where I grew my dahlias. We had 2 beautiful children. Michael, 8 years old, is a bright boy with his nose always in a book. And Teresa, just 6, my little artist who could fill 100 pages with her wild, colorful drawings.
I was what they called a perfect wife back then. I woke before the sun to bake bread so the smell would fill the house as my family stirred. I packed lunches, tied shoelaces, and waved them all off for the day. After they left, the silence would settle in, and I'd clean, I'd laundry, and in the afternoons I'd sew. My mother taught me. She said, "A woman needs a craft in her hands to never be in need." Oh, Mama, if only you knew how prophetic your words would be. Our life seemed perfect, but behind closed doors, have you ever felt a chill in a warm room? A silence that feels heavier than noise? That was our home. They were prolonged silences, unexplained absences, a feeling that I was always on the outside of some important secret. He traveled for work often, always on the first Thursday of the month. Bank business, he'd say, his tone leaving no room for questions. And I believed him. Or perhaps I just chose to, because to question Anthony was to invite a coldness that could freeze you for days. Once I dared to ask for more details, and he looked at me with such icy detachment and said, "You have a roof over your head and food on the table. You don't need to know more than that." The message was clear. Know your place. But on Sunday, August 17th, 1969, my place was about to change forever. I remember the date because it was my mother's birthday. May God rest her soul. The children were at my mother-in-law's for lunch. Anthony had left earlier, muttering something about urgent paperwork at the bank before a big transfer the following week. And I was alone. Alone and fighting a migraine so vicious it felt like a hot knife behind my eyes. The pain was blinding, creating flashing spots in my vision. Lying down was agony. I was desperate. I knew Anthony kept strong painkillers in his office, pills he brought back from New York that worked better than any herbal remedy. His office. It was forbidden territory. A man needs a space where he can think without interruptions, he'd decree. The door was always closed, but thankfully not locked when he was away. He never imagined I would dare to cross that threshold. But that day, the pain was a tyrant, and it overruled a decade of submission. I slipped inside. The room was dark, masculine. A heavy oak desk, a leather chair that sighed when you sat in it, shelves lined with books I was sure he never read. The air smelled of his tobacco, of old paper, and that expensive cologne he only wore for special occasions. My hands trembled as I opened the top drawer, rifling through pens and paper clips, my vision blurry. A wave of dizziness hit me so hard I stumbled, reaching out to the bookshelf to steady myself. My shoulder knocked against the spines, and a heavy, leather-bound Bible, a family heirloom he displayed with pride but never opened, thudded to the floor. It fell open, and from between the thin, onion-skin pages of the Book of Proverbs, a small, folded slip of paper drifted down like a fallen leaf. My first instinct was pure panic. Put it back. Put it all back. He can't know you were in here. But a force stronger than fear made me pick it up. With fingers that felt numb, I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Edward's, the bank manager. Anthony's best friend. And the message? It was only 7 words, but they were the most terrifying words I have ever read. If she discovers the truth, kill her. The room spun. 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 fears collided in my mind. This wasn't just a secret. This was a death sentence, neatly folded and tucked inside a Bible. Somehow, I moved. I folded the note, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to slip it back between the very pages that spoke of wisdom and righteousness. I returned the Bible to the shelf. I found the pills, took one with a glass of water from the kitchen, and lay down on the living room sofa, pretending to rest. But inside, a war had begun. The Gertrude who obeyed, who stayed quiet, who didn't ask questions, she was gone. In her place was a new woman, a woman whose only thought was survival. When Anthony returned with the children later that afternoon, laughing about some silly thing Grandma had said, I made a decision. I would not confront him. If that note meant what I thought it did, a confrontation would be my last act. No. I would become an actress in my own home. I would smile, I would serve his dinner, I would listen to his stories. But behind the mask of the dutiful wife, I would become a detective. I would find the truth he was so willing to kill for. The following days were a masterclass in deception. I performed my wifely duties like a robot. Breakfast at 7, children to school, dinner on the table at 6 sharp. But my eyes were now open. I saw everything I had been blind to before. The way he locked his desk drawer with a little key. The way he'd quickly cover papers with his hand when I entered the room. The hushed phone calls in the hallway when he thought I was bathing the children. Small things, innocent things, but to me they were screams in the silence. A week after the Bible incident, I had my first breakthrough. I was ironing his shirts, the steam rising in hot clouds, when I found a crumpled receipt in the breast pocket of his best suit jacket. It was from a jeweler in Richmond. The amount made my heart stop. It was almost 3 times my monthly household allowance. The item purchased? An engagement ring. A solitaire diamond. The heat from the iron suddenly felt suffocating. My wedding band was a simple, thin gold ring. Who was this diamond for? In the same pocket, a small card with an address scribbled on it. An address in Richmond. I memorized it. I put everything back, exactly as it was. My hands were steady now. The fear was still there, but it was being joined by something else. A cold, hard anger. I started making excuses to go to Richmond. I needed special fabric, I had to visit a sick cousin, I was looking for a birthday gift for Teresa. With each trip, I pieced together the puzzle of that address. On my third visit, I found it. A beautiful, modern house in an elegant neighborhood that made our humble home look like a shack. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched from my car. Discreetly, I struck up a conversation with a kindly older woman watering her roses next door. "Oh, that's the young teacher's house," she said cheerfully. "Marianne, such a sweet, educated girl. She's expecting, you know. Poor thing. Her fiancé visits every Thursday. They say he works in another city. From what I hear, they'll marry as soon as he sorts out the messy business with his ex-wife." Every Thursday. The first Thursday of the month. His business trips. Ex-wife. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was already a ghost, a problem to be sorted out. I drove home that day with a vision blurred by tears, but with a crystal clear certainty. My marriage was a lie, and I was living on borrowed time. I continued my silent investigation. I befriended the new bank secretary, Mrs. Irma, a sweet widow. At the market, after church, I'd engage her in casual chatter. "We're all so busy with this big transfer at the end of the month," she confided one Sunday. "Your Anthony and Mr. Edward were there until midnight. So much money. I've never seen anything like it." The big transfer. The one Anthony had mentioned. The one that coincided with his upcoming special trip. The pieces were snapping into place, forming a horrifying picture. Anthony and Edward were planning to steal the transfer money. The note, the ring, the pregnant mistress, it was all part of the plan. Steal the money, flee to Argentina with Marianne and their new baby, and abandon me and my children with nothing. Or worse, if I discovered the plan, the note gave him his orders. That's when I remembered a strange, small key I'd found in his shaving kit months before. When I'd asked about it, he'd snatched it away, saying it was for an old filing cabinet at the bank. Now that key felt like it could unlock my survival. I waited for my moment. When the house was empty, I began to search. It wasn't in his desk, not in his suits, not in our important documents box. Finally, my fingers brushed against it, hidden inside a fake book on his shelf. The title? Principles of Business Ethics. The irony was not lost on me. The key opened a small metal lockbox hidden at the bottom of our wardrobe, buried behind old suitcases. Inside, I found my husband's future. One-way steamship tickets to Argentina in the names of Anthony Miller and Marianne Oliveira. Fake passports, and a bundle of love letters. I unfolded the most recent one, dated just 2 weeks prior. "My love, only 2 weeks left until we're together forever. I've arranged everything as we agreed. The baby's crib is all set up. I can't wait to start our real life, far away from that suffocating town and that woman who never deserved you. Be careful with the final details. As Edward always says, if she discovers the truth before time, you know what needs to be done. But I know everything will work out. Soon we'll be the family we always dreamed of. All my love, Marianne." Tears I didn't know I had left stream down my face, hot and bitter. 10 years, 2 children. Countless meals, sleepless nights, sacrifices, all meant nothing. I was disposable, an obstacle, and if I became a threat, I was expendable. Sitting on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of my own planned obsolescence, I made a vow. I would not be a victim. I would not be eliminated. I would use his own plan against him. I would ensure my children and I had a future. I carefully returned everything to the box, locked it, and hid it away. The key went back into the fake book. I left no trace. I had 2 weeks. 2 weeks until the heist. 2 weeks to build my own escape plan. And that night, as I served Anthony his meatloaf and smiled at his jokes, I was already plotting my first move. Looking back now, I see that terrible migraine not as an ailment, but as a divine intervention, a blessing in disguise. If I hadn't been in such pain, if that Bible hadn't fallen, if that note hadn't fluttered to the floor, my story would have had a very different and very final ending. And you, my dears, have you ever had a moment in your life, a small, seemingly random accident that revealed a shocking truth? Leave it in the comments below. I love reading your stories. After discovering the whole ugly truth, I didn't sleep a wink that night. The children slept peacefully, innocent of the danger lurking in their own home. Anthony snored beside me, the deep, untroubled sleep of a man with a clear conscience. And I lay wide awake, watching the moonlight paint silver stripes on the floor, planning my every move. I had 2 weeks, 14 days to outsmart the man who thought he held my life in his hands. My first step was money. I couldn't rely on the household savings Anthony controlled with an iron fist. Thankfully, my mother's wisdom had already provided. I had been secretly stashing away the money I earned from my sewing for years. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. Women of my time didn't have bank accounts, I commented casually to my wealthiest client, Mrs. Eulalia, while fitting her for a dress. Anthony says he takes care of everything. Nonsense, Gertrude, she exclaimed. Every woman needs her own money. I'll take you to the bank manager in Richmond tomorrow. Edward and your husband will never know. And just like that, I had my own bank account in another city. It felt like my first real breath of freedom. Step 2, evidence. I needed irrefutable proof. If things went wrong, I couldn't be dismissed as the hysterical, jealous wife. I bought a small Kodak Instamatic camera in Richmond, hiding it among my spools of thread. On mornings when Anthony left early, I became a shadow in his office. I photographed documents, my heart in my throat with every click of the shutter. I learned about the ghost accounts, the small diversions over 3 years, all leading to the big one, a $500,000 transfer for the town's textile factory expansion. But photos could be dismissed as forgeries. I needed originals. I remembered Mr. Moiser, who owned the stationery store. His wife was a client. Mr. Moiser, I said with my most convincing smile, I want to make a surprise album for Anthony's birthday with copies of our important documents, our marriage certificate, the children's births. He hesitated. Mrs. Miller, I'm not supposed to. I'll make your wife that new dress she's been wanting, as a thank you. He relented. That afternoon, while the town slept, I copied the most damning documents, the ones that laid out the entire scheme. Step 3 was the most dangerous, finding an ally. I couldn't trust anyone in our town. The sheriff played poker with Anthony. The judge was Michael's godfather. They were all in his orbit. Then I remembered Inspector Mendoza, a man from the capital who conducted bank audits. Anthony loathed him, called him that self-righteous, incorruptible fool. Incorruptible. He was exactly who I needed. I learned through Mrs. Irma that he would be in town the following week. My delivery method came through my daughter, Teresa.
Her little friend was the daughter of the innkeeper where Mendoza stayed. I orchestrated a playdate and used the pretext of borrowing the mother's purse to measure the strap for a matching dress. When I returned it, my envelope of evidence was hidden in the lining, with a note asking her to deliver it to the inspector discreetly. Step 4. Our future. I reached out to my childhood friend, Luis, who had a sewing studio in the capital. "Luis," I said, my voice trembling only slightly on the phone, "my marriage is ending. I'll need work and a place to stay." "Come, Gertie," she said, without a moment's hesitation. "I have a room in the back of the studio. We'll manage." True friendship is a lifeline. She threw me one without even asking why I was drowning. Meanwhile, I played my part to perfection. I cooked his favorite meals. I listened to his worries about work. I was the picture of domestic bliss. But at night, I packed a secret suitcase. I memorized bus schedules. I was preparing for war. The tension built. Anthony grew more nervous, meeting Edward in hushed conversations. The week flew by. The day before the transfer, Mrs. Irma came to my house, her eyes wide with gossip. "Inspector Mendoza asked for all the transfer documents from the last 6 months today," she whispered. "Mr. Edward and your husband, they've gone white as sheets." My plan was working, but the danger was now at its peak. If Anthony suspected a trap, he could snap. That night at dinner, he watched me with an unnerving intensity. "Gertrude," he said suddenly, "we'll have to cancel that family outing on Sunday. Urgent matters." The outing was for the day after the transfer, the day he planned to vanish. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice steady as I passed him the peas. "The children will understand." After dinner, I found him in his office, the door unusually ajar. "A trap?" "Anthony," I called softly, "I need money for fabric tomorrow." He looked up, and for a fleeting second, I saw it in his eyes. Fear. "Of course," he said, pulling out his wallet and giving me far more than I asked for. "Buy something nice for yourself, too."
The generosity of a guilty man. It felt like a farewell gift, and it chilled me to the bone. The day of the transfer dawned. A perfect blue sky. A day for new beginnings or tragic endings. Anthony was distracted, checking his watch constantly. "I'll work late," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Don't wait up." Before he left, he did something that froze the blood in my veins. He kissed my cheek. He hugged the children for a long, long time. It felt like a goodbye. After he left, I moved like a ghost through the house. I hid money in different places. I took the children to my sister-in-law's under a flimsy pretext. I returned home to the oppressive silence and waited. The hours ticked by. The dinner grew cold. At 8 p.m., I heard sirens. 3 police cars racing toward the town square. Soon after, a frantic knocking. It was my sister-in-law, Lucinda, breathless and pale. "Gertrude! Anthony and Edward! They've been arrested! They tried to steal the factory money! And there's more. A woman. In Richmond. She's pregnant." I let myself crumble into a chair, covering my face. I didn't have to pretend the shock. I didn't have to pretend the pain. It was all real. The facade had finally, completely shattered. The life I knew was over. My husband was a criminal. The town would gossip. The children would bear the shame. But as I sat there, with Lucinda's hand on my shoulder, I felt it beneath the devastation. A tiny, stubborn spark. The spark of survival. The woman I was, the obedient, quiet Gertrude, was gone. She had been erased by a 7-word note. And as the sun rose the next day, a new woman began to rise with it. A woman who would forge a future not from perfection, but from pieces. A woman who would learn that the greatest strength is often born from the deepest betrayal. But my dears, this was only the beginning of the story. The arrest was not the end. It was the first page of a new, even more challenging chapter. How does a woman with 2 children, no husband, and the stigma of a town scandal rebuild her life from nothing? How does she face the whispers, the pitying looks, the closed doors? And what happens when the past, in the most unexpected way, comes knocking on your door years later, forcing you to face the very ghosts you thought you'd left behind? That, my dear friends, is a story for next time. If you want to know how I built a new life from the ashes of the old, how I found strength I never knew I had, and how a shocking twist of fate brought an unexpected person back into my life, make sure you're subscribed to Grandma's Diary and have that notification bell turned on. Because this, my dears, is where my real story began.